dying in bunches everywhere but here. What are the odds of a funeral home going broke? You have a business that everybody on earth needs. You can't make that work. It's got to be you, right? And yet, I don't know. What do you do when people won't die?
Well, I guess.
One thing about Chicago, people know how to die. They drown, get run over, shot, whatever it takes.
We get it done around here. It's just we're not in a hurry about it.
As far as the choice for anamorphic goes, I love the format. I'd love to say that, I can say that this is a story about a man living in isolation and that the 235 frame, provided opportunities to, if you watch, what a great movie for 240 is The Graduate. It's a lesson in composition and in how to express character and composition. So, that was on my mind, and I thought, okay, maybe there's some ways this large format, given a very intimate story, very kind of singular, simple story, could help tell some of that. But it was also just because it's the best, it's the best format in the world. I mean, right now, that you can practically shoot in terms of image quality. You're using a modern motion picture film, and you're squeezing a 235, a widescreen image, down into a full-frame piece of film. So it's the largest piece of film, and then you got a lens that goes out and grabs a little more and squeezes it on there, and there's no other format in the world, frankly, that can give you that kind of image quality. And plus, narratively, the movie was kind of a folktale. It was kind of a throwback. I wanted it to feel like an old-fashioned movie. There's not a lot of camera movement. The compositions are more classical, and so the 240 widescreen format is kind of a classical feeling format, and I thought, it made sense.
Tell me about the budgetary considerations. My understanding is you had 22 days and $7.5 million. I found that on the internet, so it might be BS. I don't know.
It's true. It was 24-day shoot, all of which were under 13 hours, and it was a $7.5 million budget movie. Kodak took very good care of us, as did Panavision, and I'm sure from a business point of view, they came out great, and we came out great. So it's possible. You might have to make some sacrifice. I mean, no question. If I shot it on high-def tape, I wouldn't have spent what I spent in telecine and all this kind of stuff. I mean, you can't argue the facts when it comes to the workflow, what you have to pay for with film that you don't with video. And I also know that there are other costs shooting high def that kind of teeter it back the other way. I mean, that's a debate that'll go on forever, I suppose. But it all depends on, it's like deciding how much money you want to spend, on your, when you're working with such low budget thresholds, you look at the big picture and you decide what's important, and then you start moving. That was actually one of the reasons that it's one of the things I was looking forward to in terms of moving from a cinematographer to director, is you actually begin to have a little bit of influence over, where money is spent, and you can start to make arguments that are difficult to make about, like, well, I don't need this much. When a cinematographer says, I want to shoot anamorphic, and I think we can sneak a little money out of the makeup department. It doesn't go over so well. But as a director, you're in a position to influence the way money's spent. And I've always believed, and this movie proved, that if you're smart and you put your money where it needs to go, that you can pretty much make anything happen.
On the last film, on Machine Gun Preacher, the anamorphic idea also came in because we wanted it to feel epic, yet it was a smaller story. It was about this one guy and his battle and all his demons, and it was a smaller budget film. But the locations were Western Pennsylvania, shot in Michigan, and Uganda, shot in South Africa. So it's very, very low landscape, kind of wide areas with not much height to them. So filling the frame, instead of having 60% of your screen with just sky or grass on the bottom, it helped you use the information more I would say, more creatively and telling more of the story with the frame. And the Last Supper is a good analogy there. Quantum of Solace, the same kind of thing. We were trying to go for a modernist return to the Goldfinger feeling, design-wise and everything in the Bond series. It's just, to me, anamorphic has a historical memory that I can't really identify consciously, but I think it's because anamorphic really only came out around, David, the days, when was it, in the 60s when Cinerama and
53.
Cinescope, 53?
53,
So
yeah.
it's relatively modern compared to motion pictures, where motion pictures really were 133 for Academy for the beginning. And then they did that to get away from, so they weren't competing with television as much. They had something new to offer. So it has historically, for me, having grown up in that period, it's like that was movies. That's epic. That's big. That tells a story in a more important way than a 133 frame, where I've shot a lot of documentaries, which I started on, documentaries in regular 16. It has a different emotional feel for me. Along with when you shoot with anamorphic lenses, as opposed to spherical and Super 35, 240, the anamorphic lens has that distortion, which to me it brings back memories of John Ford Westerns or something that I don't know what exactly, but it has an emotional impact to me. The distortion of highlights out of focus, the shift when you do a focus rack, what it does. Now, of course, I brought in Once Upon a Time in the West, which is one of my favorite films ever, shot 2-perf Technoscope, spherical lenses. So there you get the super close-up of Jack Elam and whatever's going on in the background in deep focus because you're not shooting anamorphic. So you're playing with that frame size, which to me brings across that emotional epic feeling without locking yourself into the soft focus or distortion effects of anamorphic lenses. So it's really two things you can play with as far as anamorphic and the lenses, anamorphic and the projection anamorphic. But I just feel, to me, it has an epic feeling, and I like framing for that kind of rectangle better, just in general. Like I was never a big fan of shooting Hasselblad because I didn't like the square frame as much.
I remember when I was a film student at USC, we were all showing our black and white 16 millimeter 133 movies on the big screening night with all the friends and family. And at the end of the night, they were going to screen the graduate thesis projects, the ones where they go out and get the free Panavision camera and get to shoot 35. And all these 16 millimeter 133 movies finished up. And they introduced the first graduate film, and the lights went down, right? And the curtains went like this, and the crowd, all the geeks in the crowd, start going, yeah, just because the curtains are widening out, right? To 185, it's like, yeah, and that's an emotional experience, right? That's a perfect example. The world was opening up for them, right? It was getting bigger, and it meant sit back because something bigger is coming at you. So, these are considerations, right? The size of the screen, the size of the canvas is a reflection of, the emotional content of the story you're trying to tell, whether you're trying to put very intimate human emotion on an epic canvas or whether you're trying to put epic desertscape on an epic canvas, It's not a one-to-one. It's not just because the movie's big, the film format should be big. Maybe you want to exaggerate and magnify something with a larger format that's more emotional than it is physical. The other thing that I thought might be worth mentioning about anamorphic versus 240 flat, and it's if you're in a location, right? And let's say to get a wide shot, you have to pull the camera legs back into the absolute corner of the room, okay? Now, picture yourself behind the camera in the corner of the room, trying to line up a shot of like maybe 4 people at a kitchen table. Now, if you put on a 35 millimeter lens with a 240 flat camera and ground glass, the headroom, the 4-perf of that 240 is, there's information above and below that 240 ground glass, right? All that wasted space, or if it's 3-perf, it's less wasted space. But your headroom, once you line up the headroom, like just above the family with flat 240 35 millimeter lens, right? You've got your frame size. Now pull that 35 millimeter flat lens off and put a 35 millimeter anamorphic lens on, right? Now the headroom is contained within the whole 4x3 frame, right? Because it's going out and grabbing extra information from the left and right. You now are using, in that 4-perf piece of film, you're using the whole lens, the whole field, what do you call it? The whole field
Full
of
aperture.
field of view. You're using the whole field of view. So that means that you have to put a wider lens on a location camera to get the same image size that you would in anamorphic, which is actually kind of important when it comes down to location shooting, because I don't know how many times you guys have been in a situation where you're throwing on a wider lens than you wish you had to, because you just didn't have the space to back up. And so now all of a sudden you've got this bulbous head, like stuff in the foreground because it's a wider lens is now prominent, and the kitchen table kind of doesn't feel like the subject of the shot anymore. Well, swap it out for a 35 millimeter anamorphic camera, stick the same 35 on, or in this case it'd probably have to be more like a 50. And now all of a sudden a 50 millimeter lens doesn't pronounce. You got the same image size from that little spot in the corner of the room, but the 50 millimeter lens has flattened the image a little bit, and stuff isn't as, right? So, I mean, people often think anamorphic is a difficult location format, right? Because it's unwieldy and big and anamorphic. Well, in a lot of ways, it's advantageous because you can jam yourself in corners and still get that widescreen image without, kind of throwing on a big wide lens to get it.
Expecting Mary was going to be a fairly low-budget feature film. The director, Dan Gordon, and I had spoken about what it is that he was trying to achieve with the movie, that they were going to go for a theatrical release print, that he had a large cast of characters and some very cramped shooting quarters. A bunch of scenes took place in a motorhome, and we talked about wanting to be able to use the frame to populate it with all of these artifacts and things pertaining to the characters, and to really make it a rich visual experience, even though it is essentially a small character drama. And we ended up talking about anamorphic, which was not in the game plan at all. Actually, film wasn't even in the game plan when we first started talking about the movie. It was going to be a digital movie. It was going to be high def. And the more we talked about what it is that we were trying to achieve with the movie, the more I felt that 2-perf was the best alternative for the movie. It would give us our anamorphic release print. It would give us the ability to shoot film. The average age of the actors in the movie was like 80 or something like that. So I was really wanting to shoot film on the movie. And we did our tests, and everybody sort of pitched in and made it work, including Kodak and the lab, Laser Pacific, and Panavision, who provided us with the cameras, the 2-perf cameras. And it ended up really being absolutely the best format, because in any low-budget production, you're faced with certain realities of schedule, certain realities of how much equipment you actually have to accomplish what it is that you want to do. And shooting 2-perf gave me the flexibility of being able to shoot very quickly, the way I know I can with film, and at the same time be able to work within the budget of what it is they had, because we could run for 22 minutes on a 1,000-foot roll of film, and that was tremendous. At the time, I think there were a couple of labs that were really prominent in working with 2-perf. There are probably more now, and I've not been kept up to speed on it. But I'm not sure if it was before or after that. I also pushed to have the format used for a series of commercials that I was doing for Lever based on the TV show Mad Men. And those were commercials that were going to be broadcast in 4:3 and 16:9. And ultimately, we all agreed that shooting 2-perf was going to be the best option for the look and the feel of those spots as well, because the show was generated on film. And again, that was a job that originally everybody thought would be best shot in high def. And as we got into it, we realized that we needed more of the flexibility in the look and feel of film, which is the reason why we went that direction. But 2-perf made it cost effective for us to do so, as well as fulfilling the artistic, the aesthetic objective.